All right, welcome everybody to disaster relief funds that are available. We're going to tell you more about them, how to access them, and yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started. Oh, that's not the correct. Hold on. Sorry about that. That wasn't the correct slide, friends. I'm sorry. Let me put it on the correct slide. All right. Let's try that again. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so if you are here to learn a little bit more about disaster relief in both the federal and state assistance programs. All right, so the goals today are to learn about both federal and state disaster relief funds for farmers. We'll hit a little bit on farm resilience programs, and really we wanted to have a question and answer section so that you all have a chance to determine which resource is best for you for disaster relief funds and how to apply to them. One thing to note that there really is one program to apply for. I know Alan might hit on a little bit from ODA of what happens if you apply for the ODAP funds and you get some federal funds, but really the point of this presentation is so that you can decide which program is best for you. There is information on the Oregon State website. And so if you want to know more about all of these programs, you can take a look at that website. There'll be another time that you can take a look at the website link as well. All right, Alan, you are up.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel, and pleasure to be here with the Oregon Community Food Systems Network. Had to write that down, so I got it all. So let's go ahead and jump into the slides. Go ahead, next one, Rachel.
The next
or do
one?
I have control?
Nope, I got it.
Okay, so I start with all these things, giving out my disclaimer. The program's still being developed. We're like, inches from the finish line. So I think, we've got it pretty much nailed down, but until we hit the finish line, it's still under development. So things can change, but this is pretty much where it's at. Go ahead, next slide. There we go. So in the December 2021 special session, the legislature approved $40 million to be applied to federal disaster assistance. And it's a result of the USDA Secretary Vilsack came out, visited Oregon, and got a commitment from the governor to fund some of the disasters here in Oregon. So we got the $40 million. 10% of that is used for administrative fee, and primarily it's used to partner with financial institutions and pay their services. And there's a $5 million portion set aside to be applied to Jefferson County. And I'm not sure how that got in there. I think that's part of the legislative sausage making. But essentially, if Jefferson County applies for $7 million and we have the funds to pay that, we're going to pay them $7 million. If they only apply for $3 million, we have to hold on to that $2 million difference to make it available for them if somebody from Jefferson County chooses to participate. But we really don't think that that's going to be much of a roadblock at all. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So eligibility, we tried to make this program as simple as possible, just because this is the first time we've ever done something like this. So we really don't know what to anticipate, or ultimately how it's going to work. And as we're going, we're learning a lot about if we have the opportunity to do this again, what we're going to do different. But anyways, to be eligible, you have to have a farm located in Oregon, and you have to pay Oregon taxes. If you're an Indian tribe, the tribe has to have ranching operations in Oregon. Let's go to the next one. So the program was designed for small to mid-sized farmers. So if you have a gross income of less than $500,000, you're eligible. And just for those of you who aren't tax experts, I'm certainly not, the gross income is what you actually pay taxes on. So if you're a corporate entity, that's deducting all your expense. So if you're taking home $500,000, you're probably doing okay. You don't need to participate in this program. So the other criteria is you suffered a loss due to a qualifying natural disaster. And of course, heat, drought were probably the two biggest ones in 2021. There's also fire, there's also ice damage, pest infestations. So if your crops were damaged because of, or your income was harmed because of one of those damages, you qualify. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide.
Oops.
Okay, so the amount that you're eligible for. So the way it works is we take a look back at your 3-year baseline income. And I'll go over exactly what that is here in a second, but caveman math here. So if your average farm income or your baseline farm income was $100,000, you're eligible to receive up to $90,000 with a maximum of $125,000. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And I think I go through, and I forgot which order I have these in, so I may have to back up a little bit. If you're a small farmer, which means if your gross farm income is less than $350,000 in 2021, you qualify as a small farmer. Or if you're a historically underserved producer. And there's a federal definition of that. But what it is if you're a new farmer, if you're a veteran, trying to remember all the ones, if you've been historically discriminated against, so that would be a lot of ethnicity issues. But then you would qualify for up to 95% of that baseline with a maximum of $150,000. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, what your 3-year baseline is. So from your Schedule F, it's line item 9. That's your total income from the farm. You don't deduct expenses. It's just the amount you received in 2017, 2018, and 2019. And so you just take the average of that. The reason we didn't pick 2020 is because that was a COVID year, and there was all sorts of different assistance available that could impact your income that was unrelated to farming. And there was also the whole employee issues and all of that good stuff. So we choose not to use that in the baseline. However, if you didn't farm in one of those 3 years, you can use 2020 as a substitute. You can't use it. I mean, if you'd like to use 2020 instead of 2017, can't do that if you were farming in 2017. And then if you weren't farming for multiple years during that, you can use 2020 for 1 year, then the rest of the years you'd use the NASS data. And we would just look at your crop code and the number of acres and come up with an estimate for your income based on the Oregon averages. And the most recent NASS data is from 2017. So it's not ideal, but to establish a fair baseline, we had to use some standard, and that's the best we have, quite honestly. So, and so we thought we'd get this program out much sooner. but of course the wheels of government turn pretty slow. A lot of people will have already filed their 2021 taxes, so they'll have the actual tax income. But if you don't, you can use an estimate. So let's go to the next slide. So for livestock producers, livestock producers have the opportunity to increase their income by selling more animals than what they would typically sell in any given year. So maybe they're selling mamas, or they're selling bulls, or something that they wouldn't normally do, but because of their lack of income, they needed to get some additional income. So we're allowing you to deduct certain expenses from your 2021 gross income. And those are expenses from your Schedule F that we've determined are most related to a disaster. So it would be trucking if you had to move your animals as a fuel, if you had to rent additional pasture land, veterinarian expenses, and if you had to lease additional pasture land. So we look at those, and the way you can use that to deduct from your 2021 income is you would look back to the 2017, 2018, and 19 tax returns, or your Schedule Fs, figure out what the average amount of those expenses are, compare that to your actual 2021 expenses, and the difference you can deduct from your 2021 income. Sorry, I'm tripping over numbers here. And if this doesn't make sense, because I'm going through it quickly, I understand that. I think my phone number or an email is on the last page of the slide. So you're more than welcome to give me a call, and I can go through it slower and relate it to your specific situation. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, I had a slide on that. So small farmers less than 300, historically underserved, is beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged, limited resource, and veterans. So let's move on. Okay, so actually let's move back. I'm not quite ready for this. I want to explain the loan amount in a little bit more detail. So if you look at your 2017, 2018, and 2019 Schedule Fs, let's say you averaged $100,000 in income in those 3 years. So in 2021, if you only made $50,000, if you don't qualify as a small farm or you're not historically underserved, we can give you a loan for the difference between your 2021 and 90% of the 3-year baseline. So we take the 50, or take the 90, which is 90% of your 100,000, and deduct the 50, so you're eligible for $40,000. If you are a small farmer or historically underserved, you can get up to 95% of that 3-year baseline. So in this case, it would be $45,000. So again, if you've got questions, I think we're going to have an opportunity to ask, or you can contact me independently. Okay, let's go to the next slides. So who are the participating lending institutions? We don't know yet. The state procurement process requires that we publish a notice for 7 days before we can start to sign contracts with any financial institutions. I believe that 7-day period is up today. So we do have financial institutions that are expressing interest, and I think they're committed to doing it. They just haven't signed the contract yet. So I can't give out that information, but keep an eye on our website, and we'll also be doing blasts to, various farm organizations. We'll have it on our website. We'll probably put it on our social media. And so hopefully, you stay keyed into your particular, Oregon Dairy Farmers or Trade Association, whoever that may be, and they'll get the information, and hopefully they'll pass it on. And if you don't hear from them in the next month, probably actually next 2-3 weeks, touch base with either the department or that association. So let's go to the next. And I guess I'm not sure that I explained this very carefully. The banks will actually be accepting the applications. We contracted with them because they have the feet on the ground. We're working with banks that have a statewide footprint. Well, some banks have a statewide, some represent like Eastern Oregon. We've got some on the coast. So we've got pretty much at least one option in every part of the state. So if it's not your particular financial institutions that's participating, there should be one that's close. So like I said, we're just starting to enter into agreements with financial institutions. And so we hope to have those contracts signed this week, and then we'll work with the financial institutions to get them up and running. And our goal is to begin the application period beginning the week of April 18th. Now, we're dependent on the timeline of the financial institutions. So that's our goal, but keep watching our website, and as we get that completely nailed down, we'll be publishing that information. And so the application period will be 4 weeks. Once that application period is closed, then all the participating financial institutions are going to send all the applications back to us. Actually, not the physical application, but just the information on a spreadsheet. And we're going to look at that. And like I said, we've got the $36 million available to give out. So we're going to start approving the applications based on the percentage of loss. So if you have a 50% loss, pretty confident you're going to get paid. If you're down at the 12%, I don't know. Hopefully, but I can't guarantee any payments because, like I said, our first time, we don't know if people are going to be applying for $60 million worth, or it could be $20 million. Who knows? So hopefully we will have the funds available to pay the majority of people. And if we run out of funds, we do have an option that we can go back to the legislature and ask for additional funds. We will do that if we need to, but it's up to them to approve it. So don't know. And also in our priority, if you're a small farmer or an historically underserved farmer, you're going to receive priority. So what that means is, we look at everybody with a 50% loss. We'll say we're going to pay the small and underserved first, and then everybody else with the 50% loss. Then we'll go to 40%. We'll pay the underserved and small, and then we'll pay everybody else. And we'll keep doing that until we run out of funds. And if we get down to 25% and we can't pay everybody at that percent loss, it'll be a lottery. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a forgivable loan, and it's called a forgivable loan, but for all intent and purposes, it's a grant. We really don't want you to have to pay this back, but the federal FSA is coming up with a similar program. I think one of the presenters is talking about the federal program. So hopefully we'll get more information on that. But if you're using this ODAP program as a bridge to get you to federal payments, the way it's going to work is, if you get that federal relief, you can't double dip. So if you do get federal funds, you'll have to pay the state funds back. And the way it's going to work, so let's change the numbers a little bit. Let's say your average baseline income is $500,000. Let's make it easy math, $1 million. And you took a $300,000 loss. So under the Oregon program, you'd be eligible for $150,000, or excuse me, $125,000. If you got, let's say, $100,000 from FSA, you would add that to your 2021 income. So in this scenario, if your baseline is $1 million and you made, for example, let's say 600,000, you would add the $100,000 from the federal government with the $100,000, 125 from the state. And if you're still eligible for the full $125,000 from the state, you wouldn't have to pay the state back. If going back to our $100,000 where you got a $40,000 loan, if you got $40,000 from FSA, then you would have to pay the entire Oregon portion back. And the timeline for that is in November. You would need to, if you are applying for the federal disaster assistance, you would need to go back to the bank and have them do the recalculation, and they'll make a determination if you have to pay anything back or not. If you do, you'll have until June 2023 to make the payments back. But ideally, to make it easy, what we would recommend is when you get the check from the FSA, if you owe the state, just deduct a portion of that out and pay the state. If you don't go in for the recalculation, or if you don't pay us back, we'll take that and turn it over to the Department of Revenue for collection. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, I keep getting ahead of myself. Oh, this is the estimated 2021. So if you filed using an estimate of your 2021 income, you would have to go in and get that recalculation. And if you're within $1,000 of that income, or if when we do the recalculation, if you're within $1,000, we're not going to require that you pay that back. But if you really misestimated your 2020 and it's significantly, over the $1,000 difference, you would have to repay us back. Now, if you're not seeking a federal assistance and you've got your filed 2021 tax returns, you would go in once you get the award, because you're not getting the federal funds and you've got your actual 2021, anything you receive under the program is going to be forgiven immediately. Obviously, if you lie to us and falsify the information, we can collect it, but we trust that's not going to be an issue. So let's go to the next slide. I keep getting ahead of myself. Yeah, and the payments will also be made through the lending institution. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Next steps. This is a little dated, so I think we pretty much have the lending institutions that are going to participate already talking to us. But if you do get to your lending institution, contact them, find out if they're going to be participating. And we're happy to have more financial institutions than what we currently have, or that currently lined up. So we'll let pretty much any financial institution in Oregon participate. So encourage them. Also, you want to gather your 2017, 2018, 2019 Schedule Fs and your 2021 income. And then if you haven't signed up for email updates on the ODA website, I would encourage you to do that. And also keep in touch with your trade associations to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. So next slide. I think that's the last one. Yep. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me either on my phone or email. So I'll turn it back to Rachel.
Great, thanks, Alan. And we're going to do questions at the end. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box, or we'll have some space at the end. All right, so I'm going to move into the other state program. It's the Farmer and Rancher Disaster Relief Grant Program. I'm also going to do a similar caveat to what Alan said. This is a brand new program, so We are trying to figure it out as we go. And so if you do have questions, your questions are important to us. We are paying attention to questions and making sure that we know how to answer them. So a little bit about these funds. This was approved around the same time, as Alan said, in December. There's $1.5 million for disaster funds from the legislature for farms that are not eligible for other relief programs. There is, the first round is now open and available. We were hoping that the timing with the ODAP and this program would coincide with each other, but it hasn't quite worked out that well. So the round one is open. I'll tell you more about, there's 3 rounds. So we'll get to that. The maximum grant. So again, this is a grant program. It's not a loan forgiveness program. It's a grant program. The maximum grant is $30,000. And if you're a farm in Oregon and you're not eligible or it's not feasible to apply for other state or disaster relief programs, then this would be the program for you to look into. So the information for this grant is actually on the Oregon Community Food Systems Network website. If you Google that, then you'll be able to find the disaster relief grant. This grant we're encouraging Black, Indigenous, and people of color, immigrant farmers, and ranchers. You are prioritized. Thanks, Brittany. Brittany is my colleague here on this call that is working on the application piece of it. So she's the one to ask questions. The grant applications must be for farmers and ranchers that have a maximum of that $350,000 adjusted gross farm income annually. So that's the federal definition for a small farm. So this is really geared towards small farmers. All right, so this grant program was, again, it was created for those farms that are not eligible for, or it's not feasible for them to apply for both federal and or the forgivable loan from ODAP that Alan just talked about. Again, it's small scale farmers. And the other eligibility piece is that the farm income makes up a primary or very substantial portion of the family's basic income. Oops. Preference again will be given to farmers and ranchers from historically experiencing the greatest inequities. So farmers of color, immigrant farmers, undocumented farmers will be given preference. However, all farmers are encouraged to apply. And the one caveat is farms that are primarily educational, nonprofit, or demonstrations are not eligible. So here's the explanation of the 3 different rounds. Round 1 is open. The way that this is structured is that 40% of the funds, so $600,000, will be dispersed in the first round, and then same 40% in the second round, and then whatever is remaining for the third round. So there will be 3 rounds. We are hoping that the round 2 and ODAP funds are open at the same time so that we can kind of coincide and encourage farmers to access the right pot of money for them. This is on the Oregon Community Food Systems Network page. There is a scoring rubric. So it's very clear how it's going to be scored on how each farm is going to be scored for this grant. So again, the eligibility pieces that I just talked about, I do want to say that, again, this is for natural disasters. It's not for COVID related reasons. For example, if you lost a market or you lost a restaurant sale, it's not really geared for that. It's geared towards farms that were affected by natural disasters. The other thing is that this grant program is in English and Spanish. So the application is in both English and Spanish. So if you are a farmer that speaks primarily Spanish, or that's your first language, then we've tried to make this as accessible as possible. All right, so the apply button is just on the Oregon Community Food Systems Network page. It's at the bottom. If you read through the web page, it's got all of the information. The website's been down at the bottom of this presentation, so hopefully you've caught it there. The application, again, is meant to be as simple as possible, kind of like what Alan said. We've tried to make everything as simple as possible so that it's easy to access. And then I do want to give a shout out to, there were a number of organizations and farms that advocated for this pot of money, to have a different pot of money than the ODAP, so that there were farmers that might not be able to apply for that, the ODAP funds, that they had access to a different program. And then my colleague Brittany, who is on this call today, she is the face and the person behind the application. So if you do have questions, her email address is there. And then again, there's information on the smallfarms.oregonstate.edu website that's listed there. That's got a whole list of all of the different programs that are available. All right, Kathy, you are up.
Yay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Fergie, and I am representing the U.S. Department of Agriculture Beginning Farmer Rancher Program, and I'm going to talk briefly, very briefly, about some of the disaster programs that our agencies have. So U.S. Department of Agriculture Farm and Ranch programs work, of course, with farms and ranches of all shapes and sizes. We work with beginning farmers. We work with farms that have been in existence for generations. And I don't know, our disaster programs are readily available. Sometimes they're not as easy to get a hold of, which is why it's really great to have these partner programs coming out from ODA and the Oregon Community Food Systems Network. I'm really excited about this. So next slide. So a couple definitions that are really important. You know, we do have a pretty specific, we have specific definitions for pretty much everything. So, you know, beginning farmer rancher has not operated a farm or ranch for more than 10 years. I am going to point out that it doesn't matter what your age is. So you can be someone who is retired, who has never farmed and ranched before, and still be a beginning farmer. There are other eligibility pieces as a part of that, which I'll let you guys read. What I want to focus on is the disaster description. For us, pretty much every single program and agency requires that it be some kind of natural disaster. And sometimes that can be really confusing for people who have had like a horrible wildfire that was man-made, for example, or a horrible flood that happened because somebody running the dam didn't do their job right. Unfortunately, in instances like those, our programs generally aren't able to help. So just know that up front. And then we'll get into the better stuff. Next slide. So first, Natural Resources Conservation Service. So this is actually the agency that I work for. This agency assists farmers, ranchers, non-industrial private forest owners, and enhance the natural resource aspect of their farm or ranch. We both offer consulting as well as financing. And this is like our flagship program. We have a number of areas and activities that we can fund. Again, the funding is for individual producers to address on-farm conservation. What happens in disaster settings is the disaster happens, and oftentimes what we can do is kind of backfill with a special funding pool to address an emergency resource concern. And everything we do is a resource-based concern. So if there's a wildfire that happens, once there is a designation of the county designation of an emergency, we can come in and do like a seeding project. So there's no soil erosion. Projects that practices that are going to keep soil erosion from happening, that kind of thing. So again, looking at that resource concern, keeping soil in place, protecting your property from any further damage after that wildfire. The other program that we have is more of a community-based program. It's the Emergency Watershed Program. And that actually needs a sponsor. Usually it's your Soil and Water Conservation District. But there's funding behind that program to help communities build back based on whatever that natural disaster was, and address their natural resource concerns. Everything's based on a natural resource concern. Next slide. So risk management actually is a precursor. So risk management offers crop insurance. And so based on what you're producing and you know where you're going with what you're producing, you work with your crop insurance agent and you insure your crop for the coming year. Again, it has to be natural disaster, natural losses. I'm not risk management, so I'm not going to go into this very deep. I just want you to know that it's there. But there are a lot of nuances with this. So anybody that wants an extra bit of story on this, I actually have one. And so you can connect with me online. I'll give you my contact information so I can talk in more detail about some examples on this. Micro farm insurance is a new program under their whole farm insurance. And for the first time, smaller farms are going to be able to get insurance as well. Crop insurance cycle year opens in the fall and closes around May 15th, it seems like. So that whole cycle is already over for this year. Next cycle will open up starting federal fiscal year in October next year, or this next coming year. Next slide. And Alan, it occurs to me, we probably aren't going to hit the Farm Service Agency program you're thinking of. We're just going to hit the highlights of some of the tried and true programs. I am not Farm Service Agency either, but I do know about microloans. Microloans are really good for beginning farmer ranchers, and because they have the fewest restrictions and eligibility requirements. So if you're brand new to farming, this is actually a really good loan for you. And if you have suffered damage on your property and aren't able to get help other places and don't have more than $50,000 of loss, this might be an option for you. I'm not going to go into any detail on operating loans or farm ownership loans. Once we start getting into these loans, there are eligibility requirements, and so you have to be a farmer for at least 3 years. Some nuances like that, but that's not always the case. There's exceptions to everything. So I let the Farm Service Agency people talk about the exceptions. I just want to make sure that you know that there are things like operating loans that can help you out, and there's farm ownership loans that can help you get a farm. And then next slide. And then non-insured crop disaster assistance program. Free to beginning farmers and ranchers for crops that can't be insured. So going back to risk management, if you're growing something that risk management does not insure, the non-insured crop disaster assistance, non-insured, that will cover it. And pays out in the event of a disaster that results in a lower yield or prevents planting at a specific time of year. The one thing that I really want to emphasize with Farm Service Agency, you got to go to your county office and you have got to get registered in their system. So as like a disaster is declared in your county, you'll know about it. These programs, as they become available, you'll know about it. But if you're not in their system, when your emergency happens, believe me, because I've been there, trying to go through the paperwork when you're in the middle of an emergency is not fun. So, you know, meet with them, get to know them, get signed up ahead of time, and make friends. So hopefully you don't have a disaster, but if you do, you've got a friend when you go to the Farm Service Agency. And next slide. Derek Johnson is my Farm Service Agency partner. He would be the person that answers the bulk of the questions, in-depth questions. And again, this is my contact information. I'm happy to visit more in depth about the stuff that I know, but I also wanted to leave time for questions. We've got a handful of minutes for questions.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that. I am going to stop the share now, and I'm going to stop the recording as well so that we have just an opportunity for those of you to ask questions.